Retroality TV presents Reimagine That with Chris Mann, offering refreshing reality with a retro twist. Our special guest this week is everyone's favorite upstairs neighbor, actor Richard Kline. Also, Chris dishes up the exclusive behind-the-scenes backstory on Joyce DeWitt's historic YouTube reunion with Suzanne Somers. And we will delve once again into the realm of the subconscious with our resident dream interpreter, Yvonne Reba. And now, introducing your host, Chris Mann.
Thank you, Linda Kay, our vintage-voiced announcer and producer. And welcome, everybody, to Episode 5 of Reimagine That, where retro pop meets forward thought. Happy 2012. It's January 31st, so technically I think I can still say Happy New Year. We are back after a holiday hiatus. Don't hiatus for taking a break. We had a chance to work on some other projects that are very exciting, and now we are excited about the next 3 episodes we have in store for you over the next few weeks are going to be spectacular, starting with this show. We are so thrilled to say that we have Richard Kline TV's Larry Dallas with us. He will be sharing exclusively with us his thoughts on the historic reunion this week of his Three's Company co-stars, Joyce DeWitt and Suzanne Somers, on the February 2nd episode of Suzanne's new YouTube show, Breaking Through. You can find that at youtube.com/Cafe Mom Studios. I've known about this reunion, this shocking reconciliation between Joyce and Suzanne. I've known about it since early December, and I've kept it quiet. I've kept it a secret. I guess I learned that from Suzanne's book, Keeping Secrets. Joyce DeWitt called me and said, I just did a reunion with Suzanne on her new YouTube talk show. And 5 minutes later, after I lifted my jaw up off the floor, I was very pleased for her. And she seemed very pleased with the way it went and is happy that that opportunity arose for them to move forward. And it's a private conversation, so I won't say much more. I think that's up to Joyce. I haven't heard Joyce publicly comment on it, but I wanted, and I think it's important to share that with the audience, you Three's Company fans who are listening. And I also have to say that I didn't say anything about this. And I knew about it, and I didn't say anything in December or January. And then my friend Pavan Patel, who is the incredible news director and reviews director and blogger extraordinaire at Sitcoms Online. He's such a sleuth. He went online, saw the first episode of Suzanne's show, Breaking Through, and noticed within it that Suzanne mentioned to Kathy Lee Gifford that she would be recording a reunion with Joyce. So Pavan broke that story, and then Access Hollywood and Perez Hilton and everybody else followed suit and did their thing. But let's give credit where credit is due. I'm also happy to say that Richard has his own story of transformation of sorts and how he's reimagined his life in the last few years by moving back to the East Coast, his East Coast roots, his stage roots. He's really had a renaissance in the last few years on stage. And so he shares that with us, as well as how helping young and young at heart actors to dream the impossible dream, to quote Larry Dallas, via his actors workshop, how that has inspired him and keeps him going. So then stick around for a fascinating segment on inspirational dreams with Reimagine That's very own dreamweaver, Yvonne Reba. Now, much like Jack Tripper gave Larry Dallas the chance to sing his hairy-chested heart out at Jack's Bistro, Richard and John helped give me the chance to dream the impossible dream when I embarked on telling the, at times, very comedic, and at times very dramatic, true human story of Three's Company in my 1998 book, Come and Knock on Our Door. By the way, I'm planning a new edition of the book this fall in connection with Three's Company's 35th anniversary this year, so stay tuned. In the coming months, I will keep you posted. With all of this talk, primarily by Suzanne, a Three's Company reunion and reconciliation, I think it's important for me to share with you what I know about Suzanne's efforts and really her resistance year after year after year, at bringing about a Three's Company reunion, or now, sadly, a Two's Company reunion. Suzanne told Access Hollywood recently that there's been no contact between her and Joyce in 31 years. Now, perhaps that overstatement was made in rush or in fervor of publicizing her February 2nd show. Sometimes you can't get into details on live TV or these entertainment shows, but I got you some details, and I got you some juicy ones. Joyce talked about this on Reimagine That late last fall, and that very well may be the last time she talked about the efforts she made over the last decade or so to reconcile with Suzanne, to offer that olive branch, which Suzanne decided for one reason or another not to take. At least that's the information I have. So listen to those podcasts. That may be the last time Joyce talks about it or her differences with Suzanne. Let that be the record. But also let me give a little bit of insight here into some other details over the years regarding Joyce and Suzanne and John and Three's Company reunions that sadly never were. First, let's talk John and Suzanne. Suzanne was asked on The Talk recently, the CBS talk show, "You and John made up, right?" And Suzanne said, "Sort of," which was a first because Suzanne has been saying many, many times that she and John made up, very much so. Suzanne had tried for a number of years to get some sort of a Three's Company movie going with John, or perhaps with John and Joyce. When I met John for the first time in '94 on the set of Hearts of Fire, I was still going to school at the University of Tulsa, wrapping up my studies there, and came out to meet him, and he said, "Suzanne just asked me to appear on her talk show." She was doing a syndicated daytime talk show. He said she wanted me and Marky Post and, the cast of Hearts of Fire to come on, but I said no. So John wasn't having it. A year later, John would run into Suzanne for the first time in 15 years at a Broadway event after Victor Victoria, and they spoke, they hugged, they apologized to each other, and apparently peace was made. John had already interviewed for my Three's Company book, and getting Joyce and Suzanne was a different story. I got Joyce finally in October of '96, and Suzanne came into the mix in January of '97 in the 12th hour, right before my manuscript deadline with St. Martin's Press. I got an extension. I interviewed her 2 or 3 times. I got follow-up interviews with John and Joyce and the producers. One of the things Suzanne said to me was that her husband had pitched a Three's Company feature to Taffner, who owns Three's Company, and, quote, "maybe that's where the resolution can be." John, again, was not having it. He felt that any type of reunion movie would just be financially motivated. He wasn't seeing it. It wasn't happening. So when I would ask Joyce and Suzanne multiple times for interviews for the book, a lot of what I was getting back from Suzanne's people would be, "Well, have you talked to Joyce yet? Has Joyce talked?" And Joyce's people would sometimes ask, "Well, have you talked to Suzanne yet? Has Suzanne talked?" In retrospect, I totally realize one was waiting for the other to begin the conversation, so then perhaps they could come in and respond. I definitely felt that was the case with Suzanne and her plans. I learned that Suzanne and Joyce had made some initial contact, or at least sorta, kinda, almost contact, in the mid-90s, around 96. Suzanne had seen one of Joyce's neighbors from Santa Fe on a plane and gave him a note to give to Joyce. Joyce tells me that she, in turn, either sent a note to or called Suzanne, or both. It's in the book, the epilogue. Can Three be company again? This reunion stuff has been on people's mind for decades now. So there was something happening then. 15 years ago, there was some initial contact. And then my book was published right after Suzanne's second autobiography, After the Fall, was published, in which she said some, let's just say, not nice things about Joyce. And I had really gone out of my way to get Suzanne in my book, to weave her point of view in, which was very challenging because Suzanne's point of view and version of events on Three's Company, particularly her acrimonious exit from the show, are very different from everyone else's. But I did it. I'm proud of it. It brought balance to it. People have said to me that they felt the book was very balanced. Suzanne then did her own book, and Joyce was not happy with that. So they did Extra, and they did Inside Edition, and Joyce was there with my book, promoting it as the real story, the real balanced factual account. And Suzanne was there promoting her book. And then Joyce took my book onto the O'Reilly Factor, which was really trippy to hear Bill O'Reilly say, "Tell me about Christopher Mann's book." So the books sort of were pitted against each other, and Joyce and Suzanne were again pitted against each other by the media. John also very graciously took my book onto the Donnie and Marie show, talk show, TV guides, truth behind the sitcom scandals, and other things. So there's John and there's Joyce with my book. Really unheard of for stars to do that with a third party's book that they interviewed for. But that's the kind of people they were and are. And then there's Suzanne. So needless to say, I haven't heard from Suzanne, talked to Suzanne since. But I kind of got caught up in this too in the 1998 True Hollywood Story. The Joyce and Suzanne thing had been going back and forth on all of these shows. And I was asked about Joyce and Suzanne. And I said, at age like 25, my first time on TV, I felt a little bit like a deer in the headlights. But I said, until they sit down and talk to each other one-on-one, I don't know if they'll ever really be healed. Now, what I wish I had said and what I really meant to say is that I don't know that their relationship will ever really be healed. Because I'm all about communication. I was a communication major at University of Tulsa. That was a big thing for me in the book, getting these people to communicate, getting everyone's point of view, perspective out there so that there can be an understanding and put an end to these wacky Three's Company misunderstandings. And here I was on E, and I created a whole other misunderstanding. I learned that soon thereafter, a lady wrote both Joyce and Suzanne and lectured them both about forgiveness and sent them books on how to forgive. Okay, that did so not go over well. And I learned how to parse my words a little bit more carefully on TV thereafter, because I really was wanting Joyce and Suzanne to talk. I had followed all of their careers. John's feature career and Hooperman and Hearts of Fire, after Three's Company, and Joyce's metaphysical, spiritual journey after Three's Company, which she talked about here on the podcast. She's an amazing woman. John is an amazing man. Amazing spirit. And Suzanne is so smart. I had read her autobiography about all the things she had overcome growing up and in her young life. And I was so happy that she made a comeback with the Thigh Master and Step by Step and everything. So I was really coming from the right place in my heart. But I got caught up in this war of words and the media hype of all of that. But then 2 or 3 years had passed. It was 2001, and there was a prime opportunity for Suzanne and John and Joyce to reunite on the CBS morning show, the early show. They did a retro reunion segment on March 15th, 2001, the 24th anniversary of Three's Company, leading into the big number 25. Suzanne was a no-show. She declined to show. So instead, John held up not only my book, again, but also a Chrissy Snow doll that I sent to the producers. They asked for some memorabilia. And he did a little liposuction joke on the doll that totally got him in trouble. A couple days later, Suzanne was on Larry King, admonishing John for the joke. A day or two after that, I was meeting John backstage. He was on Broadway doing Neil Simon's The Dinner Party. The first thing he said to me was, "Did you see Suzanne on Larry King?" We had a very lengthy conversation. So much for the John and Suzanne reunion. Suzanne told the world at that point that she had been fighting breast cancer for about a year. So John sent out a heartfelt comment to the press, and Joyce reached out again to Suzanne, sent her, I believe, a heartfelt letter, and also tried to call her on the Home Shopping Network when Suzanne was on air, but was not patched through. Joyce really, really did try, and I know there was another effort probably after that. Suzanne ignored it. Suzanne would go on to various shows saying that she and Joyce didn't get each other, etc. So apparently Joyce and Suzanne were not meant to talk until recently. In fact, I was a consultant on both the A&E biography shows on Suzanne and on John in late 2001, early 2002. John interviewed for Suzanne Sundance, Suzanne did not jump at the opportunity to interview for John's. There were excuses and delays and sort of a general lack of response, and the producers were telling me this. Look, we told her John interviewed for yours. You should interview for his, and ultimately she did. But for Suzanne's show, the producers of that biography had a list that I am told came from Suzanne's husband, Alan Hamill, of people that could not be interviewed for Suzanne's biography. And Mickey Ross, the executive producer of Three's Company, was on that list, understandably, as was Joyce. So Joyce was not allowed to participate in that project after having reached out to Suzanne in a heartfelt letter. So draw from that what you will, but that is a fact. Then, in spring 2002, Fox Network was really hot on doing a Three's Company reunion in a retrospective special with clips. I got a call, again, from one of the producers on that project who said, Joyce and John have tentatively agreed Suzanne is the holdout. Do you know how we can get her? And I said, sorry, I really can't help you here. But yet another person I heard this from. So that did not materialize, apparently due to Suzanne not wanting to reunite, at least with Joyce, if not John also, which is ironic given all of her efforts to do a feature. Suzanne recently told TV Guide that there was some effort to reunite a couple of years before John passed, but it was a complicated business deal and it didn't happen. I think she's referring to the Fox thing. Not sure what was complicated about it, but my feeling is if a person really wanted to do it, they'll do it. And then the Three's Company NBC movie happened, and Joyce came into that in summer of 2002 as a co-producer. I was a consulting producer. Joyce really inherited a project that had long been in development, originally based on my book. That's a whole other story. But they had an agenda based upon media that had occurred to tell the story with a slant on Suzanne, and Joyce walked into that, and Joyce told me she tried her hardest to not make it a bloodbath, to bring some balance, to soften some things, but Suzanne didn't like it. And Suzanne did a couple of interviews saying, Joyce is doing this thing about me, I don't understand it. So there was another opportunity down the drain. And then yet another opportunity came for Suzanne to reunite with John and with Joyce. John invited both women onto his hit ABC sitcom, 8 Simple Rules, in fall of 2002 to do, I believe it was presented to them as a dream sequence. Just maybe one scene, a cameo from both of them. And what a lovely, nice bow on the whole Three's Company drama that would have been, particularly with that NBC movie coming up in spring 2003. And Suzanne declined. I'm sure she had her reasons, but she declined. And so that, once again, that's like at least the third time in 2 years, decline. Don Knotts came in. He did the cameo instead. Mr. Farley waking up with John at the end of the show. It was hilarious. The movie comes out spring, May of 2003. And then I see on Extra, John was interviewed sort of passing by. I guess it was at the upfront presentations in New York. He was there for 8 Simple Rules. And he said, May of 2003, something to the effect of, yeah, next year we're going to have Joyce and Suzanne on the show. They're going to come on. I wish I had the clip because I can't remember if he said together or separately, but John was still trying, still holding out an olive branch to Suzanne. And sadly, as we all know, a few months later, September 11th, 2003, John tragically suddenly passed away. So sadly, a Three's Company reunion would never be. Suzanne has said that she tried to get Fox. I think it was Fox that was hosting the Emmys in 2003. It was Fox because she went on to Fox Good Day Live a few days before the Emmys and basically pitched on live TV, the Emmys need to get Joyce and me on there doing a presentation for John. And Suzanne said something along the lines of, Joyce would do it or Joyce should do it for John, which I thought, okay, maybe you want to call Joyce up and have that conversation. I know a conversation didn't happen. The Emmys said no. They had Henry Winkler instead. And then that's been it for the last 8 years. So, all things considered, all of the stuff that's gone on in 31 years, all the media hoopla, I am so glad that Joyce and Suzanne have reconciled. And I really feel deep in my heart that John would be happy to. On a final note, I wanted to say I have a really cool feature story, cover story, in the February issue of Well Bella magazine with actress Alexandra Breckenridge from the hit new series American Horror Story. That is available at wellbella.com and also in GNC stores nationwide in February. I also recently interviewed Paula Abdul for the March issue, and we have Mary Lou Henner and some other great ladies lined up for spring and beyond. So wellbella.com. And now, let us go and knock on the door of the coolest upstairs neighbor of Jack, Janet, Chrissy, Terry, and Cindy, Larry Dallas, Mr. Richard Kline, who joins us in this exclusive Reimagine That interview. Welcome, Richard. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Hi, Chris. It's been a long time.
It's been a while. Well, thanks for coming knocking on our phone.
I remember when you used to come to the taping. How many tapings did you go to? Like 100 or 10?
At Three's Company?
Yeah.
You know what? I actually didn't get to go to any, Richard.
Oh, that's right. You were banned from the building. I totally forgot.
They had a little set for me, and I phoned in from the side.
You know, it's so funny because your journey, I know this is all about me, but your journey was so interesting because when you first showed up and, you know, rumors were, oh, this kid is like hanging around, we're going, stalker!
Right,
and then, you know, as things evolved, you wrote this brilliant freaking chronology and expose or whatever you want to call it, history.
Thank you.
Of the show, the book, Come and Knock on My Door, which is, you know, considered the Bible for Three's Company. And the way you were able to get all those interviews from the Mucky Mucks, you know, from Fred Silverman on down, I think was outstanding. So I'm congratulating you. That's how this interview is going to start.
I thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I will take the label literate stalker. Three's Company taught me everything I know, Richard. So you are to blame in part.
Okay.
But thank you very much. You were right there, you and John, from the beginning, being supportive of a young kid's dream to tell this story. And I look back with fondness. So it's cool to catch up with you years later here.
You know, and I'll tell you something. Who knew then that the show would have such a longevity and such universal and apparently international appeal? Because, I mean, I just got a letter from Spain. I get letters from Hungary and Romania and, you know, Eastern Europe. It's very, very bizarre. New Zealand, I get letters. But who knew the popularity of the show then, and that you, particularly Chris Mann, would sort of fulfill the dream of thousands and thousands of fans who want to get, you know, within 100 yards of John and Suzanne and, you know, and all of us. And you did it. So, I mean, congratulations on that, too.
Thank you. You know, the impossible dream. To
my favorite episode.
Larry's right. You know, it has been a journey, and back then in the late 80s, early 90s, before the internet, I kind of felt like, you know, I'm really alone in this. No one could love Three's Company quite like I do. And contrary, now so many of us have come out of the woodworks. So
I know.
It's been a cool role to fulfill.
I know. It's amazing. Totally amazing.
Well, you've had such a long career before, during, after Three's Company, and about 5-6 years ago you returned to your East Coast roots. What took you back there?
Well, I grew up in Queens, New York, which is one of the 5 boroughs. Of course, I lived in Manhattan after I served in the Army in the early 70s. And I did a lot of theater, a lot of commercials, a couple of movies of the week in New York, and my agents told me to move to California. So that became, you know, that 29-year journey with a brief 9-month respite in the early 90s to do a Broadway show, a musical called City of Angels. But I wanted to move back to the East Coast for a long time, and I basically stayed in L.A. for my daughter, who was attending, you know, school there. And then, of course, she went to Northwestern, but she was living with me because I was divorced from my second wife. Happily married now for 12 years to my third wife. but I was always doing theater in the hiatus period.
Yeah, yeah.
And even though I had a California agent, he would say, "Oh, well, they're doing this thing in the East Coast and whatever." So Kennedy Center. So I went, let's go back to New York. And to be honest with you, a lot of my family still lives in New York. And so I went back to do theater, and lo and behold, I started doing theater, and I love it. I love the stage.
Yeah.
I've done a couple of movie things. I mean, a buddy of mine directs a lot of the Adam Sandler movies, so I did some small parts in Adam Sandler movies. But just did a pilot in April with an Academy Award nominee, Janet McTeer, who's got the Academy Award for Alfred Nobbs, the Glenn Close movie.
Right.
And that was with Lauren Ambrose, and it did not sell. So, I mean, there is opportunities to do film and TV, but my main focus is twofold. It's doing theater and teaching acting, which I adore. So
that's great.
I couldn't be happier being in New York, and actually I live in New Jersey, but I'm 30 minutes from the city, so it's the best of both worlds in that respect.
Perfect. And I love kind of how things are circuitous, You start in the East Coast in the theater, and now you're back.
Yeah.
And, I want to ask you here in a bit about some of your recent stage performances. I mean, you've toured in Wicked, and you've done Broadway. I
had the best time ever touring for 13 months in Wicked, playing the Wizard. And it was a great way to see the country. For example, I'd never been to New Orleans. I had never been to Denver, and a couple of stops in between. And it was a terrific, and, sold out every night. I mean, it's a phenomenon, and that was fantastic. But I'm really excited what happened most recently, as recent as the end of November. We did a tryout of a musical directed by David Hyde Pierce from Frasier.
Oh, yeah.
Called It Should Have Been You, and I was playing opposite Tyne Daly. She was my wife.
Wow. And
some other Broadway heavyweights, Harriet Harris, Howard McGillin, the longest-running Phantom of the Opera star. And so it got rave reviews and sold out, and according to David, who I spoke to just about a month ago, we're headed for Broadway in the fall. So we got all our fingers crossed.
That is fantastic.
According to David, it's just a question of getting a theater, and you can't book a theater a year in advance. And we couldn't open earlier because Tyne Daly is in London doing master class until the end of April. So it looks like we might be landing on Broadway sometime in the fall, and that should be exciting.
That is fantastic. Well, and you've done Broadway before, the David Mamet November. That was in 2008 or so?
Yes, 2008, correct.
And Tyne Daly, I mean, she's Gypsy. I mean, you're in there with the best, keeping good company. So congrats on that. And I want to ask you, too, here in a bit about your acting workshop. And, of course, around this time last year, you were James Franco's special guest at Sundance for his, I guess he called it an art installation titled Three's Company, the Drama.
Yeah, that was quite an experience. It bordered on the surreal.
Right, yeah.
In so many ways. But then here's again where I talk about, the popularity of the show. Who knew that James Franco, movie star / practically Rhodes Scholar, or at least Harvard Scholar, or wherever, Columbia, wherever the hell he is, would be such a fanatic about Three's Company.
It's great.
To invite me and my wife Beverly up there was really, really sweet of him. And, 127 Hours was nominated, and he was freaking brilliant in that movie. If you think about it, one man carrying a movie for an hour and 40 minutes, and he did.
With one arm.
With one arm. One man, one arm, one rock, and one Swiss Army knife. But anyway, thank you. So that was kind of amazing. The installation, I'm not going to critique, but it was bizarre to say the least.
I've seen a few little clips on YouTube. Well, just on YouTube, and there's a shot of the camera panning back and catching you in the audience. You sort of have this look on your face like, what is going on?
Oh, yeah. It was pretty weird. Pretty weird.
Well, with scholars like Mr. Franco coming forward, it legitimizes the rest of us Three's Company fans, so I'm all for it.
Here's the thing about Three's Company. We all know that when it first came out, it was smashed by critics. TV Guide, whatever guy wrote in it, piece of crap, whatever, to jiggle comedy, titillation, and all that. And, I'll be honest with you, being like a New York theater snob at the time, I didn't think that it was the greatest thing either. I mean, I thought it was silly. And in retrospect, it's endurance. It makes me laugh. I don't think I have to apologize for it. I mean, think of all the shows, the, videotape, which they don't do anymore, but all the tape shows, One Day at a Time, whatever, that they did in that period and that have had the longevity that Three's Company has had. And I mean, the comments that I get from people are so heartwarming, from anything from immigrants from various countries saying, I learned to speak English watching your show. And okay, great. And also, when I was down, I would turn on the thing, or I'd come home from school and it cheered me up, and on and on and on. And thank you for making me laugh. There's not enough laughter, and sitcoms are not as great as they were in the old days, although I love Modern Family, so that's, my caveat.
Right.
But you don't have to apologize for the show anymore. It's just, it has tremendous worldwide appeal, and I don't know, you would know this better because you're a TV scholar. If it's equal to the longevity of Lucy, because, I mean, Lucy ran forever. I don't know if it's still on.
Absolutely. I catch Lucy like on the Hallmark Channel, and absolutely. And I think that people are finally starting to get it. People in the media, the intellectuals that made a name bashing the show back then. It's like, farce comedy. It was really taking those broad comedy elements of Lucy and putting it into, as you know, a sex farce, which was the thing that really, blew people's mind.
Yeah, but in retrospect, hindsight being 20/20, a sanitized sex farce.
Yeah, so sanitized. When I was 5, 6, 7, that age, I lived in Oklahoma, grew up in rural Oklahoma. Now that's pretty sad. But my parents, they got Three's Company. Thank God. I couldn't watch soap because they knew that was really an adult show. But Three's Company, the double entendres went over my head. And now the older I get, the more I look at it and go, wow, this really is romper room, There's nothing is happening on this show. Maybe Larry once or twice got some action, but it was off camera.
The consensus is that Larry really didn't get anything.
Really?
We wonder about Larry.
We wonder
whether he actually scored or so he's just a big talker.
One of the big mysteries. So it's got this enduring legacy, and one thing the critics didn't get that the audience did, and this is a testament to its timelessness, is the heart of the show, that you guys were able to put, heart and soul into a puff pastry of a farce. To me, it's really remarkable. So it certainly was not a Frasier, a character comedy, but you guys worked it in, and you made characters people liked and loved, and here you go, 35 years later. And speaking of Three's Company, the drama, we've learned recently that your good buddy Joyce DeWitt reunited for the first time in 31 years with Suzanne Somers. And I found out about that shortly after it happened. I dropped my jaw and then picked it up off the floor. I mean, thoughts on that at this point?
Well, I got a call from Joyce. Joyce and I have been pretty, not say close, but we've been in contact more than anybody else. Well, of course, there's not too many of us left. Right. But I've done a couple autograph shows with Joyce and Priscilla. And then Joyce came to see me in November on Broadway, and I saw her just recently. She did an off-Broadway thing, Miss Abigail Explains It All to You, whatever. I saw her in that. And we've been in touch. And she called me and said, you're not going to believe this. And I said, what? And she told me the whole story. And I just felt really great for her. It sounded like she was figuratively letting out a tremendous breath of air, of held in air, you know what I mean, or weight off her chest. But it just sounded like a great release from her. And, I was happy to hear it, and I'm glad and appreciative and admire that Suzanne reached out to her,
Yeah.
So, all things come to a happy conclusion eventually.
That's
the way
nice.
It should be.
Almost the feeling for me of the Camp David peace talks or something. It was like, whoa.
Not quite Palestinian-Israeli, but it's close.
It has taken everyone by surprise, and you had mentioned that not many of you guys left. Suzanne did an interview a week or two ago on Access Hollywood, and she said, everyone's gone from Three's Company. And I thought, well, I know about 5 cast members who would disagree with that.
Well, Somebody directed me to PerezHilton.com, which is a celebrity or Hollywood whatever
gossipy
gossip site, right? And that there was a quote in there that from Suzanne that they're all dead. So there were comments. So I wrote a comment. I said, Richard Kline is still alive. Last time I looked.
Oh my God! I think I saw that. That's brilliant.
That's on PerezHilton.com.
That's great. I love it.
Yeah.
You saw Suzanne. You did an episode of her ABC sitcom Step by Step back in the 90s.
Yeah.
You have gone on record in recent years or back then, coming out a bit in support of what Suzanne went through, at least in terms of seeking profits and this massive syndication,
No, what I said was, I don't, God knows what you said in an interview 20 years ago, but what I think I said and what I think I maintain is, I think she was given short shrift. I think she was given a raw deal and humiliated by the producers for doing what they did to her at the end of that, whatever season, you know better than I do, where they had her do 30-second or minute-and-a-half phone calls.
The tag scenes.
Yeah, tag phone calls. And I just thought that was classless on the part of the producers.
Yeah.
I may have gone on record, and I hope I got on record saying I did not think it was very professional for her. Probably prompted by her manager husband, Alan Hamill, to report sick when she wasn't and then had everybody scramble around trying to do a taping.
Right.
And that happened a couple of times.
That's a biggie.
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, we all want more money. We'd all love to get what the lovelies on Friends got, but it just wasn't to be. So I think blame, if you want to put blame or whatever, I think responsibility falls on both sides, both producers and Suzanne's quote-unquote people.
Yes.
But I don't hold any animosity towards her. And as a matter of fact, when we were on Step by Step, she was very warm to me, as was Alan. So
nice.
I have nothing against Suzanne.
Well, that's nice to hear, and I think that's fair. That's a fair assessment because it was a complicated series of events that I was fortunate enough to get you guys to open up about for the book, to really show people how over a period of weeks and months this came. But one last question here on Suzanne.
Yeah.
She is often quoted as saying, in fact was recently on Access Hollywood, something to the effect of, I was fired for asking to be paid what they paid the men, and everybody turned on me. Now, everyone has their own perspective, but what do you make of this statement? It's leaving out some stuff in between of the missed shows and the this and the that. But do you kind of get where she's coming from?
First of all, saying the men, saying what the men are getting on the show. There's only one man, that's John.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
If he was getting more than Joyce and Suzanne, I think he was welcome to it. No matter the title, Three's Company, it was really, let's face it, it was really John's show. He was the pivot, he was the focus, off of which the girls were, bounced off, if you want to call it, comically.
Yes.
Reacted. And he was the focus of the show. It's John's show. It wasn't Suzanne's show.
Right.
It wasn't Joyce's show. It wasn't Mr. Furley's show. It wasn't Larry's show. It was John Ritter, the supreme freaking physical comedian of our half century.
Yes.
Brilliance. And, there'd be no show without John. And let's say something happened to John, whatever, or he got into contract. Who's going to replace John as the main guy?
Right.
Or as John would probably say, well, we could always get Bo Bridges.
He used to sign Bo Bridges.
He would always say, you know what? Bo Bridges could do this better than I am. When he was joking and he was insanely hilarious. But come on,
Incredibly.
So going back to her statement, I wanted what the men, she wanted what the man got. She wanted what John got.
Yes.
You probably know better than I don't know what salaries anybody got. I mean, except for me. Did he get it proportionally more than the two girls?
Not quite what she has implied, and in fact, not close to what she's implied. And I should say this. I heard her give an interview to Adam Carolla on his podcast 3 years ago, and memory serves me, she definitely implied, she may have said that John was making 10 times what she was making, which is not true. I was told John was making around $50,000 a week when she was making around $30 a week in 1980, which is not even double, let alone multiple times.
Right. Well, here's the number I heard, and let's put this to rest because this is kind of blood under the bridge. But
sure.
What we heard, tell me if you heard the same. I heard Alan was demanding $250,000 an episode, which something what Carol O'Connor was getting.
Up in that range.
At the time, on the 8th year or 9th year of all of them.
Right. I've heard $150 per show, but I've also heard her say that they were shooting for his salary, which was about $250 a show, which is astronomical for an ensemble show in which you are technically the third build. And John, I heard, had a deal that he would always make more, so it was just outpricing the fee that I'm told ABC was even paying for the show.
So going back to your original question, in regards to her statement, I think it's an inaccurate statement.
Yes.
Okay? And moving right along. Let's talk about Joe Paterno. May he rest in peace. No, I mean, that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I appreciate you commenting on that and setting the record straight a bit. So many years have passed, but when I do hear the men comment, I think, well, let's ask one of the men from Three's Company, and so that gives it some balance. Now, going back even further, 35 years, almost to this date that you were cast as Larry in the puppy episode, wearing that plaid, suit coat as the used car salesman with a heart, as you've been described. Does that totally wig you out that was 35 years ago?
No, everything sort of wigs me out. Like my daughter's 27. She was born a week after we closed the 1984 season.
That's right. John and Joyce accepted the People's Choice, and you couldn't be there because you had just had your daughter.
That's right.
Wow. That puts things in perspective.
Yeah. No, it's kind of amazing.
It truly is. And speaking of John, you had such memorable, funny chemistry with him. And I remember the first time I interviewed him, I said, and this was 20 years ago, I said, who did you most look forward to working with on Three's Company? And he said, Richard Kline.
Oh, he said that?
Yeah, he did. And I was like, well, that's cool.
Don't make me cry, Chris.
Here's the Barbara Walters Three's Company. But, the scenes that pop are You Don't Remember Me, Do You? Larry's Bride, and the camping shows and the bits you did with John, and Strangers in the Night, where you helped him serenade the woman.
Oh, that girl, yeah, up in the balcony, yeah.
So funny. What types of scenes or emotions flood to you when you stop and think about John?
Well, first of all, I cannot actually watch Three's Company anymore.
Really?
Yeah, I can't. I just can't. I just get choked up and I start bawling, and it's just rough. I mean, I've had many dreams of John and seeing him, talking to him, whatever. Yeah, it's just
wow.
It totally destroys me.
Oh man!
But the thing about working with John was Dave Powers, the director. I mean, John and I would be screwing around so much on the set that Dave Powers would sit there. I remember he was sitting there in the rehearsal hall, and in those days you could smoke anywhere or whatever, and Dave was a smoker, and he had this little tiny ashtray and a cigarette, and he'd sit there at the edge of the chair, and he'd tap some ash into an ashtray and go, you want to work today or what? Are we going to do this? You want to do this? We could take a break, guys. Because John and I mean, we just, Martin and Lewis, I don't know, we just kept, we just fed off each other's goofiness. And you know what? I'm not the first actor to tell you that he's stolen stuff from another actor, and John stole stuff from Jerry Lewis, and I stole stuff from John. So when I do things, I'll do things in a play or whatever, and I'll just do a hint to John, and people will scream. I said, the credit has to go to John Ritter.
That's very cool. Well, his spirit definitely lives on, and definitely through those closest to him, including you. And I think he would get a real kick out of that. Speaking of Jerry Lewis and Martin and Lewis, you guys are big fans. Did you ever know if Jerry was aware, ever watched Three's Company? Did you ever get a chance to meet Jerry?
I only met Jerry once. I did the telethon out in Vegas. And the biggest memory of that was Sammy Davis was there, and he came up to me and said he was a huge fan. But Jerry was, he was very, very busy, whatever. He just shook my hand and said, "Thanks, pal. Thanks, pal, for doing this." And then he sort of like moved on. But then Sammy came over and said, "Hey, man, I really dig your show." I can't do Sammy Davis, whatever.
Not bad.
And I may have said something to Sammy like, "It's funny, you don't look Jewish," but whatever.
I love it. So Sammy Davis, I've heard that Sophia Loren was a fan of Three's Company and John Lennon. So
really?
Yeah. In fact, John had told me that he was reading a book a couple decades ago, maybe, where he read that one of John Lennon's favorite shows was Three's Company.
Oh, my goodness.
And John said he nearly fell out of the chair when he read that.
My first awareness of that kind of popularity was I did a all-star baseball game at Dodger Stadium, and we're in the dugout with some of the Dodgers. And, of course, I'm a huge baseball fan, as was John. And, some of the players came over, and Jerry Royce came over, whatever, Steve Yeager, and said, "Hey, man, we love your show." And I went, "You do? I mean, you watch it?" And they go, "Yeah, we got a lot of time on the road, in the hotels we watch it." I'm going, "Oh, wow." And, of course, Dick Clark, when I did Pyramid, he said, I'm in a hotel room in New York or whatever, and I'm watching, and I'm going, okay.
I love it.
Interesting.
It's great escapist fare, and I think when you're getting people in the industry who admit to it, that they watch the show, then that's a huge compliment, because a lot of people in the industry don't watch TV at all. They probably are so tired. You had mentioned earlier just all the trippiness of Three's Company, and speaking of trippy, last spring you, Joyce, and Priscilla Barnes did a reading from an episode or two of Three's Company as Jack, Janet, and Chrissy. Now that's trippy. What was that about?
Well, I got a call from Don Taffner, the distributor, of course, of Three's Company, among other shows, and they said that they hired a writer from L.A., I don't remember the guy's name, to write a composite stage production of Three's Company.
Wow.
Which, by the way, was my idea about 15 years ago or whatever. I had a meeting with Taftner Jr. out in California because I thought we should do something like the Brady Bunch. They did the Brady Bunch off-Broadway. So I had two writers that I had contacted. We had a meeting, and it went nowhere. They were wanting to know about touring and fees and this and that. It got very, very complicated, so I just went, I'm not that involved as a businessman. I'm a creator. I wanted to direct, whatever. Never went anywhere. So I get this call from Taffner that they hired a writer, and they've combined, 3 top episodes of Three's Company into one, mini play, a 2-hour play, whatever.
Wow.
So, yeah, and then they called me up and said, "You're reading John." I went, "Oh, that's weird." And they hired some kid, a friend of the company, to read Larry, and Joyce, of course, Joyce, and then Priscilla read Chrissy, and it was okay. I don't know. Who knows what they're going to do with it. If they ever do it, maybe I'll put on a brightly colored shirt and scarf and come in as Mr. Furley.
Now, that would be trippy.
It would be totally trippy.
I love it. I love it. So, and maybe you'll direct this. They need your direction.
Well, I think they should. Yeah. Who knows the show better than I do at this point?
Absolutely.
Whatever.
Well, you never know with Three's Company, but this being the 35th anniversary year, I've heard rumblings of a stage thing. I've heard that James Franco had wanted to do some sort of film reimagining. What are your thoughts of that kind of reimagining of these cultural iconic series?
I think they should be left alone.
Yep, leave them in the time they existed.
They're redoing Spartacus now. I saw Spartacus with Kirk Douglas as a kid. I thought it was fantastic. What are they doing? Why do they need to do that again?
You can't top that. You can't top that. But a stage show that is true to the essence of the original, that's a different thing, you feel, than a full-on sort of remake?
Yeah, I do. They're welcome to it. I think it would work great as a farce on stage. Yeah, you're right. I think it would be kind of fun, but
a little noises offish.
Who knows? You're first of all, you're really going out on a limb to find another John Ritter. That's how do you do that?
Yeah.
It's how do you find another Bogart?
That's right. Well, if they do it, they need to have Richard Kline at the helm.
At least taking tickets.
Right.
I'd be happy to show people to their seats. I don't know.
Well,
Who knows?
theater is second nature to you. And you've also, I got to mention, with film, you'd mentioned the cameo you did. You and Al Pacino there in Jack and Jill, which I thought was very funny. You did Liberty Heights, starring, opposite Adrian Brody and Joe Montana a few years ago. That's a great Barry Levinson film.
Yeah.
As a pop icon who's really been in America's living rooms and bedrooms every night for 30 years, Larry has been getting action. How does and you didn't even know this.
Did not know that.
How does your appreciation for your experiences as a stage and film actor, or even just a dramatic actor, period, how does that differ from your appreciation for Three's Company? Because there's so much more to you than Larry, but people instantly recognize you as Larry.
Well, look, there's no way I'm going to shed that quote-unquote legacy or iconery, which is like Sean Connery, but it's iconery. That's, I'm sure you've heard this before, but I'll say it again. That's just one part of the job of being a professional actor or the career. I mean, yes, I'm known for that, but I fortunately have the skills to be classically trained, and I have done Shakespeare. Hopefully we'll do Shakespeare in the future if it calls. Do dramatic shows, do comedy shows. And I'm really proud of an NYPD Blue. I did terrific couple of scenes with Mark Paul Gosselaar, is that his name? Kid, whatever.
Saved by the Bell, yeah.
Yeah, directed by Mark Tinker. And I have that on my acting reel. And things like that, I'm just happy to have the versatility that I have, and that's as a result of a lot of training and a lot of perseverance. So, I got a couple auditions coming up, one for a John Patrick Shanley play that I'm really excited about. So, there's, it never stops. And I put Three's Company in perspective. I have a great amount of appreciation and gratitude for working with everybody on that show, and particularly John, Joyce, and Priscilla and Suzanne, and the two icons, Mr. Knotts with 5 Emmys, and Norm and Audra. That's invaluable experience. And any good actor, and hopefully humble actor, will tell you that those are learning experiences. You get to work with pros, it just makes you a better actor.
Yes, which must be one of the pearls of wisdom that you share with your students in your actors' workshop.
I start out by telling them one amazing pearl of wisdom, and that is never, ever leave your wallet in the dressing room. And then we go on from there.
That's great. A couple more quick questions, Richard. We thank you so much for your time here. Do you give some basic advice to young, passionate actors in training who want a career in showbiz? Yes. Young, not so young, and old. Never stop studying. Yeah. It's about the craft. It really is. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because no matter how much charm you have, or how much good looks you have, or what kind of figure you have if you're a woman, or what kind of rugged jawline you have as a man, it's only going to get you so far, and then craft takes over. Tom Cruise, a very handsome, dynamic actor, studied and studied and studied and studied. Yes. At Meryl Streep, Yale University. Right. So Sigourney Weaver, the enduring actors have enduring careers because they've put in time with the craft. Absolutely. And the relationship there is what keeps you going when Hollywood doesn't always answer the knocks on the door. Right. And speaking of knocking on door, one more Three's Company question. It's a two-parter. With the 35th anniversary here, do you foresee now maybe a TV Land or, who knows, ABC reunion now that Somers DeWitt has come together? And secondly, have you kept anything from the show, Larry's zebra pajamas? Do you still have Larry's chest hair for this reunion? Okay, first part, I have no idea what the powers that be want to do with 35th reunion. I'd be happy to be a part of it. Great. It would be great. I haven't seen Suzanne since Step by Step. And as far as keeping anything, any Larry memorabilia, no, I didn't. I did not. Dang. And it's sad because if we knew then what we know now about eBay and all that stuff and keeping, I've never been a hoarder. Really, I haven't. I hate clutter, and I'm not that sentimental. Somewhere around the house there's a picture of my late mother. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
But I'm not a souvenir kind of, I don't keep pins and decals. But I do have the chest hair.
You still have that.
I still have the chest hair.
There is something to be said for that. Well, if there's ever a Three's Company museum tour, I have a few things there, but we certainly hope that there's some kind of a stage revival so that we can see Richard Kline directing.
That would be great.
The next chapter. Well, Richard, again, thank you so much for checking in with us. I really appreciate it.
You're totally welcome, Chris.
It's been a journey, but I thank you.
You're absolutely welcome, and I wish you the best and Happy New Year, and hopefully, we'll see each other at a reunion.
Hey, that would be great. Take care, Richard, and we will be watching for you.
Thanks. Take care.
Larry Dallas dreamed the impossible dream, but our next guest says in the dream world, anything is possible. Our next guest is our resident dreamweaver, Yvonne Reba, and in this segment, she shares with us some of her inspirational dreams from the past. She explores the subconscious and all of those little messages and symbols and concepts that have a deeper meaning that she has recorded in her dream journals through the years and gone back and applied her expert interpretation skills to so that we may have a better understanding of our dreams as they unfold with our lives, so that we can reimagine our realities and be inspired by those messages from deep within to change our life for the better. For more info on Yvonne, check out her website, YvonneReba.com. That's YvonneRyba.com. Happy New Year, Yvonne.
Happy New Year back to you as well, Chris.
Well, we are intrigued by what you have for us again in this new year. People are always looking for inspiration as the year begins, and what a perfect theme for us to start with, inspirational dreams. What do you have for us?
Well, I was looking through my dream diaries, and I picked something out from the 90s, the early 90s.
Great.
And I was looking through it, and I thought, whoa, there's an interesting one that I'd forgotten about. And it's from 91,
Wow.
August 91.
Hard to believe that was more than 20 years ago.
Yeah, you're right. Keep forgetting. We're getting there.
Crazy.
So, anyway, I got that dream, and it's about a skull. Mm-hmm. Now, strangely enough, the other dream I want to talk about is an extremely famous dream by Jung, the great psychologist. Mm-hmm. He and Freud, and we talked a little while ago about this, you and I, that there is a movie out about this, about how Freud and Jung came together and then eventually they split.
A Dangerous Method, I think, is the name of it.
That's right, yeah, that's it. Well, this dream is a very famous dream that Jung had, and it also features skulls. So when I found this first one, I thought, well, that's pretty neat. One from me about a skull and something from Jung. I'm going to put myself up there with Jung here.
All right.
So,
sounds good.
Well, he was wonderful. I mean, he really opened up the idea of dreams coming from the subconscious and having messages, and he talked about the collective unconscious and so on. We'll do that another time, but this is my dream to begin with.
Perfect.
So here I'm dreaming that I'm in what's kind of like a medical room. It wasn't an operating room, but it had a lot of doctors and people in white coats and things sitting around me. And I'm in the middle of this group listening to them. And one of them announced that I had had a skull transplant.
Oh, my.
Yes, and I didn't know about it, and that's even weirder. So, you think, how could that happen?
Didn't get the
memo. This is a dream. Anything can happen in a dream.
Oh, yeah.
So my old skull, they gave it back to me, and I saw that it had been impressed or stamped just behind the ear with what looked like to be a trademark of some kind, okay?
Weird.
Like this thing belonged to whatever. And I said, now, there's always somebody to take advantage of you when you're not watching.
Right.
So I shouldn't have been watching this. I thought, this has got to be somebody close to me that has snuck up and stolen my skull. And they had put a new skull made out of some, and this was exactly what it said, a lightweight alloy, man-made kind of thing, okay?
Wow.
And they had taken my original skull and put that in there, but to the amazement of the doctors, my body rejected that alloy skull and it grew another one, on its own.
Kind of like a starfish.
Yeah. I don't know. How about that? That was pretty amazing. But,
wow.
And I woke up and I thought, well, who would ever think of having a skull transplant and then growing another one?
Right.
It's even weirder.
That is weird.
But even though it was rather humorous, there is a lot of inner meaning here that I managed to figure out eventually. Because when I looked around, there were not a lot of explanations about what a skull means in a dream.
Really?
No, there weren't. And I looked recently, as a matter of fact, and there are different ideas about it. The nearest thing I could get, even though it didn't say skull, was about bone. I thought, well, skulls are made of bone. Let's see what it says about bone.
Right.
And I got the best, or the nearest, let's put it that way, interpretation says bone, foundation, belief systems, strength or support, essential for proper functioning of all other parts. And that comes from Betty Bethard's The Dream Book, which is just a small book, and I've had it for years and years, but she was absolutely spot on in so many interpretations, and I really like her better than I like some of the bigger ones, where you have thousands and thousands of pages that, don't mean much.
Right.
So I looked at the meaning of this, Chris, and I thought, okay, let's go through this. So the skull, ideas, spiritual thoughts, and so on. That's what I'm seeing, because it's the container for our mind, all right, our brain. This is the container for the brain, but we also have what we think of as the mind, which is bigger than the brain. It goes out from us. It seems to be bigger than we are, as it were.
Yeah, and some people even feel like the mind is really the spirit.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes, our minds are incredible. It's so absolutely amazing that we can do so much with our minds, and the imagination that we have, which is way beyond anything else that other species have, even though they do wonderful things. Our imagination allows us to go forward into the future way beyond anything else that exists.
Right.
And give us ideas and planning and so on to solve problems before they even come up. So you might have the instinct, if you're an animal, to stockpile food for the winter, but the human being will be able to see, hopefully, what the weather's going to be like and be able to adapt and adjust the life accordingly.
Right.
So anyway, let's get back to this skull. So here my subconscious was saying, don't be accepting anybody else's ideas, especially these lightweight ones that people come up with. And the trademark was like, well, you belong to this group or that group. That isn't the way I was going to be. I needed to find out for myself. I needed to grow my own ideas, as it were. And my body rejected the man-made lightweight alloy, which was various belief systems that were being impressed upon me at that time in 1991 by other people of different religions, different thoughts about what life was about, and they were all, oh, we're right, we're the only way to do it, this is it. And I was going through the sifting out what I felt was right and what wasn't going to suit, and realized that you're not going to impress me or trademark me in any shape or form. I am going to grow my own thoughts, my own belief system, my mind. And not long after that, I became very interested in science of mind and became a religious scientist, which is a very straightforward, basic idea, and is based on what we know about the law of attraction. We hear a lot about it today. It's based on love and the teachings of Jesus, which are, don't be worried about all the other laws and commandments and things, but love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And love is it, yes.
Yeah, and so this dream in 91 helped inspire you to continue on your path and to expand your thinking and create your own foundation.
That's right, yes.
Interesting.
Yes, absolutely. It was very inspiring. Of course, it was already in me to be, I wouldn't say I was a rebel, although some people might think that, but to me it was, no, that does not suit me. That particular, religion or whatever that you're trying to haul me into does not go along with how I feel life should be. I honestly believe we're here to help each other and support each other. And if you want to call that love, that's love.
Yeah.
Love is not, it's not the gushy, mushy stuff that some people associate it with, but it's a deep caring, yes.
Absolutely.
So that was my dream. Okay, so are you ready for Carl Jung's dream?
Absolutely. This is... Ooh, yeah, bring it on.
I know, skulls are funny things, in many religions, the skull is revered, after all. I mean, the Day of the Dead, for Hispanic people in Mexico and so on, is a time of family coming together and remembering the connections they have with their ancestors. Mm-hmm. And it's very important. And skulls are not considered to be, horrible, ugly things. I mean, they're an essential part of our being.
Not scary. Lots of times we think of skull and crossbones and poison and all of those sort of eerie things, associations with skulls. But there are also positive histories with the skull. The Indiana Jones movie, the Crystal Skull.
The Crystal Skull. And that actually, I remember seeing that in a book many years ago, kind of an encyclopedia or whatever, how this incredible skull had been carved out of one piece of crystal and nobody could see how it had been done. No marks on it or anything. I mean, how the heck did what was considered to be a primitive people create this very sophisticated and beautiful thing? And there are more than one crystal skull. Yeah, apparently they were used as religious icons or symbols or whatever. We don't know, but they are a special thing, and they were considered to be very powerful and highly sought after and worshipped almost. So anyway, I'm going to tell you the dream that Carl Jung had, and it is a very famous dream, and some of your listeners might know it already. And he told this to Freud and asked him to give him interpretation for it. So he is sitting in an upstairs room, what appeared to be his house. It wasn't his house, that's the way dreams are, you know that. And this room was furnished in the style of the 18th century, with very old oil paintings hanging on the walls and so on. And he realized that he'd never really noticed this room before. And he thought, well, what's the rest of the place look like? So he started to go downstairs. And he went downstairs, and as he went down, it got darker, and the furniture in the house started to change to medieval furniture. So he was going back through time, as it were. It was very heavy and dark, and then he went through that, and then the floors, instead of having carpet or wood, they were made of red brick. And then he got really curious, and he decided, I'm going to explore the whole house here. And he went down into the cellar. Now remember, in all dreams, a house is really yourself. You are living in a structure, the body, and dreams often portray that as the house. And where you are in the house is very important. So you'd look at a dream where you're in the kitchen, that's you. And that's your creative place where you make what you want to eat, right? And eating is, of course, very important to us. We have to eat to live. If you're in the bedroom, bedrooms are restful places or places where we have sex and so on. And so the dream might be referring to some aspect of your life there and so on. Now, down in the cellar is usually considered to be you're approaching the subconscious. You're going deep within yourself into a place where it's fairly hidden and dark. And what do we keep in cellars? We keep stuff that we want, like wine, perhaps.
Wine,
or
absolutely.
Things that we don't use very often, or we bury things there, perhaps. It's a very mysterious place.
Just the other day, I was watching an old Dick Clark Pyramid show, and it was things found in a cellar. Yeah, all those things that you don't think about, but I guess your subconscious is like that.
Well, isn't that funny? But yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Cellars are they're very sort of mysterious places and often dark and gloomy. And, in horror movies, there's always something gory going on down there.
Right.
But Jung's dream, he was in the cellar, and then he noticed that there was a doorway. And he went over to the door, and there was a flight of stone steps going down, of course. So he went down there, and he found himself in a huge kind of room, which had stone slabs on the floor instead of red brick on whatever, and a very sort of rounded high ceiling. And the walls looked ancient, absolutely. And as he was looking at the walls, he realized they were from the Roman times, that he was in a place that had been originally the Romans had built. Now, in the corner of the room, he discovered an iron ring in a stone slab. So, of course, what he did? He got a hold of the ring and he yanked it and pulled it up. And lo and behold, there's another flight of narrow stone stairs going down. So he kept going further down and further down all the time in the dream. Now, when he got to the bottom, he found himself in what looked to be like a cave, tomb, or whatever, from prehistoric times. And it had, really, really way back.
Wow.
And there were two skulls, thick with dust, crumbling almost. They were starting to crumble, and some other bones around them, and a few shards of pottery and some bits and pieces of stuff. And that was the end of the dream. But when he woke up, he realized that his inner being was saying, there's a whole lot more in a man or woman than you can think possible, right? The house is not just this on a foundation. There is a lot of hidden stuff going on underneath. And it goes back through time. It goes back to the beginning of when man appeared on this earth. And the two souls, he didn't know what they were. And he asked Freud to explain it. Well, Freud had a great deal of difficulty trying to figure this one out. And it didn't fit into what he was used to. He didn't want to go back in time, that he wanted to deal with the present. He didn't want to get into what was the mystical side of what Jung was saying this dream was about. He wanted to place it with relationships that were going on in Jung's life. So he said, who are these two skulls? You must know who they are. It's got to be somebody close to you, and so on and so on. So they back and forth, and in the end, later on, Jung said that he realized that if he had disagreed with Freud at this point, that Sigmund Freud would be furious. Their relationship was disintegrating. And Freud looked upon him as a kind of son, but that put him in the position of authority as the father.
Right.
So this was the bones of it all, if you like, making a pun here.
Right.
But he did agree. He said, well, it could be two female relations. I think it was either his wife or mother and sister-in-law, something like that. And he just got out of it that way, though he didn't believe that. He didn't believe it at all. So what happened next was that Jung then went off because he'd had this incredible dream, which he knew was a whole lot more than just talking about his relations.
Right.
It was talking about where are we coming from and what are we built on? We have built on from prehistoric, that was when man first became sentient beings and realized, actually could think and imagine, there was more to life than just survival. And we know that from prehistoric caves where they have done paintings of the animals and so on, but they also had carved figures and some made out of clay, which had managed to survive and are in some museums in various parts of the world, of what they think of as the goddess. And the goddess is usually a pregnant woman because to them that was the wonderful part of life, and they represented pregnancy with flourishing trees, fruit growing and so on. They hadn't got into the agricultural stage of things, but they could see that things formed throughout the year, and they started to formulate the first belief system. But there was more to life than just them and their immediate survival. And this was built on through the centuries, the millennia, and so on, until we came to the very sophisticated place where man is today, where there are many different belief systems that are growing and flourishing all over the world.
Fascinating. I mean, who knew that the skull, this barren thing, a skull, could inspire, but we forget that it originally houses our brain, our mind, our spirit, and so you were able, and as was Jung, to find the layers and the symbolic meaning behind these skull dreams. It's fascinating to me.
Well, what I think is interesting, part of it anyway, for Jung, of course, it was like a huge breakthrough in what the subconscious remembers. And from there he went on to talk about the collective unconscious that all of us share.
Right.
And then we share it in many ways, and dreams is one of the ways that we share it. And it was about finding your way and realizing man is more than an animal. I believe animals also dream, of course, and have their connection with spirit too. But here, that's what Jung was finding. And he was saying, there's so much more going on here that we're looking at. It's not just about our relationships with our loved ones, although that's important. And Freud was saying it's all about your relationship and your conflicts with your people around you. That's what he said. And that basically sexual repressed urges and so on had a lot to do with it.
Right.
And Jung said, no, it's not that at all. There is so much more. And he was right, because look at how many people have investigated dreams since then, and how many books there are on this subject, and programs on television. I mean, that it's going on all over. People are investigating it. Look at me.
Absolutely.
I have all these books with my dreams in them, and they've helped me so much. And in that dream of my skull growing again, you don't think about this. We actually do grow every part of us. You'd never think that you're growing a skull, would you? But you are. We are growing. It's a wonderful, magical thing, the human body. And here we are with complete personality encased, really, inside of this skull, because when you've lost your mind, that's it. You can still be alive, but It's not like it's worth it. You know, we are infinite beings spiritually, but we're very temporary as far as the body goes. You know, not many of us make it beyond 100, which seems a lot to a human being, but is nothing compared to the earth. So, and that's okay, you know, because you never die. You never die. You just keep going.
And so Jung, he really had more of a spiritual interpretation of dreams. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In fact, he was coming to that, and he was very much interested in that side of life. And Freud was into the physical urges that we have from childhood, the repression that children have when they realize they're going to lose their parents at some point, or they're going to grow up and move away from their parents, or they're going to lose their mom, or their dad has their mom, you know. And he talks about the Oedipus complex, you know. He talks about a lot of sexual things. For Jung, it was, wait a minute, I'm getting dreams that tell me that there is so much more going on inside of us, and that we do not have to listen to somebody else's interpretation of what the belief system is, whether it's this religion, that religion, whatever it is. We do not have to do that. We have to make our own way and find the truth.
Good stuff. And so for people that have weird dreams, would you recommend just jotting them down, looking them up, and seeing if perhaps the dream is trying to inspire some change in their life, is trying to inspire them to expand their thinking? Is that really kind of an angle that people should consider regularly when they have weird dreams?
Well, look at that one dream. From that dream, let's say my dream was telling me, you're on the right pathway. Do not accept what somebody else says you should do to join this group. Do what you feel is right. Research and ask for guidance. Prayer is wonderful. Meditation's good. Do those things until you get your answer, and I did. And I was guided into a belief system, science of mind, in which, without realizing it, I'd already believed in. I just didn't know it existed as a religion. I just didn't know there was a whole bunch of folks out there that believed the same thing.
Who knew?
Yeah. And that's one of the things that people often say is that, well, I always believed this. I didn't know there was a religion about it, but that's the way it is. So it guided me, and I have used that, of course, throughout my life since then to get where I want to be, you know, and to guard me and support me and help me, not only me, but my family, my friends, the people around me. I mean, it's not just me. What good is it just for me to be happy? I want to be where everybody's happy. I want my whole family to be. I don't want to see them in misery and me be happy. I mean, what kind of a person would I be?
Absolutely.
I have to build it so we all are and mesh together in this and feel supported and loved.
So pay attention to your dreams.
Absolutely. Write them down. Some people want to talk into a tape recorder. That's fine. Write it down later on. I'm looking at a whole book here that was written in the early 90s. It goes up to about 95. And I didn't write every dream that I had in there. I just wrote the dreams that were interesting and that meant something, you know. And that was a very important time for me, just as I was leading up to this, revelation for me, that there were people out there that would be supportive of me in my belief system. That was it.
That's great stuff. So even seemingly the most bizarre or mundane of dreams, if they have an unusual element, look it up. There could be some spiritual or creative inspiration there.
You got it right, Chris. Absolutely. That's exactly right.
Well, thank you again, Yvonne. We are happy to have you with us as we start 2012. Hopefully we'll be able to talk about 2012 and all of those eerie things that come along with it. Talk about Erie, the Mayans. Maybe we can go down that road, but this is a good way to start, to inspire us on this journey.
Well, we certainly can, Chris. And I don't know if you know, but I have done with a partner, we've done it 3 or 4 times already, the Mayan calendar and the history of the Mayan people, and why the world is not going to end in December of this year.
Thank God.
Yeah, that's true. So we can talk about that next time. That might be fun.
Perfect, because, you know, we want to inspire people to awaken to all of these great messages that are coming through their dreams. But at the same time, do we only have 11 months left? I hope not. So give us some hope there next time, Yvonne.
Yeah, we're okay, Chris. We'll be doing this next January.
Let's plan on that. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Yvonne, and we look forward to chatting again in February.
Yes, thank you. And it's great. I really enjoyed myself.
Happy 2012 and beyond.
Thank you.
Reimagine Reimagine That with Chris Mann was brought to you by Retroality TV. Copyright 2012 by Chris Mann. You can find us at retroality.tv and at reimaginethat.libsyn.com. Tweet us at RetroalityTV or join us on Facebook at facebook.com/RetroalityTV. And don't forget to check out our TV channel at youtube.com/RetroalityTV. And let's take a lesson from this week's highly anticipated Suzanne and Joyce reunion. It's never too late to reconcile with your former roommates. Congratulations, Suzanne, on bringing us one step closer to achieving world peace. Kumbaya, my lord, kumbaya.